What a long, strange trip it's been. We ventured to each and every Smash Bros. Game and talked about everything that made them unique and special. We talked about all the things that each Smash Bros. Game that disappointed me. I wanted to make this finale something pretty unique for the closing of the Smash Bros. In Retrospect series, so I decided I would use this final video as a compare and contrast video about all the main things in the game. Let's start with a very general idea. Let's compare the development of characters throughout the series. In the first game, there were only 12 characters. Each of them were the main characters from the Nintendo games and were very easily recognizable and became the staple characters that would be involved in every following game. We had Mario, Luigi, Yoshi, and Donkey Kong from the Mario universe, Link from the Legend of Zelda universe, Samus from the Metroid universe, Captain Falcon from the F-Zero universe, Ness from Earthbound, Kirby from the Kirby games, Fox from the Star Fox game, and Pikachu and Jigglypuff from Pokemon. All of these characters were very well known and made a sort of Nintendo All-Stars version of Smash. Melee introduced many new characters and took from even more well-known games. You had the original characters from Smash 64 along with 14 characters, bringing in 3 new games, Fire Emblem, Game & Watch, and Ice Climber. While it was amazing to see so many new characters, so many of these characters were actually just doppelgangers of their other characters. Pichu was a near exact duplicate of Pikachu, Dr. Mario was extremely similar to Mario, Roy was almost the exact same as Marth, Young Link was pretty much just Link, I still don't know what the difference is here, and Crenando was almost the exact same as Captain Falcon, just slower and more powerful. I guess you could make an argument that Falco is pretty close to Fox, but there's enough differences that I don't consider that myself. While not all of these characters were as well known as the original Smash Bros. Game, they were still fairly recognizable and are still said to be the classic characters. Brawl did something we hadn't seen in a Smash game, mainly because there was such a small roster in the previous game compared to Melee, which was remove characters. We lost Mewtwo, Roy, Pichu, Dr. Mario, and technically Young Link, although he was replaced with Toon Link, who was almost the exact same. We got many more characters, almost all from recognizable games, except for maybe Rob. Additionally, this game added in Snake from the Metal Gear Solid series, and Sonic from the Sonic series. While I enjoyed this much expanded roster of characters, I still played as Mewtwo, Roy, and Dr. Mario constantly in Melee, so seeing them removed saddened me greatly. However, Ike was a great replacement, especially with him being much different from Roy, and Dr. Mario was pretty much just forgotten considering Mario is almost the exact same. Same as before, there were some characters that people didn't recognize as well, but it was a nice change of pace to see so many new faces. Smash 4 expanded the list so immensely that it has really become a true Nintendo fighting game. Characters like Mega Man, Ryu, and Bayonetta don't follow the same trend of Nintendo characters, along with Sonic, but they still add some more freshness to the roster. Mii Fighters were added in the game as well, and added what many people had been asking for years, custom characters. While it's not as open as people would hope, it's still a way to create your own fighter, both in looks and fight style. There are some characters that still confuse me on their inclusion, like the Wii Fit Trainer, but I'll take it. Again, they add more customizability and replayability. Real quick, I just wanted to cover the stage selection in each game. Like the characters, the number of stages in each game only increased as time went on. It went from being 9 stages in Smash 64 to 29 stages in Melee, to 41 stages in Brawl, to 42 stages in Smash 4 for the 3DS, or 55 stages for Smash 4 on the Wii U. Each game improved these stages to the point where what started as a nice background and arching platforms turned into a wide variety of moving platforms, crazy changing backgrounds, many stage hazards, and even bosses on the level as a normal thing in the case of Pyrosphere. So yeah, they got really crazy. Also, in Brawl, the stage creator was introduced, something never even thought possible back in the days of Smash 64, and then improved in Smash 4 to make it even more customizable. Music in each stage has always been extremely great, from Smash 64 to Smash 4. While I extremely dislike every single song in Skyworld, I like every single other stage's songs. I also would like to mention the ability to choose songs that can be played on stages, which was also introduced in Brawl. It's great and I love it, but there's nothing too special about it than it really allowed for, yet again, more customization. I think just like uniqueness was my word of the day for Billy Hatcher, customization is my word of the day for Smash Bros. Next thing I want to compare is the single-player modes throughout all the Smash Bros. Games. The first game only allowed for one single-player game, which was Classic Mode, or just called One-Player Mode at the time. Melee was where single-player was really developed, expanding on Classic Mode along with adding in Adventure Mode, Stadium, All-Star, and Events. Brawl didn't add much in terms of number of solo game things, just expanded greatly on the Adventure Mode. But it did add in a new Stadium game, which was Boss Rush. Smash 4 actually added in a net increase of 0 solo games, but it was a bigger change than one would think. Although it removed Boss Rush in Adventure Mode, it also brought in Master Orders and Crazy Orders, and changed Break the Targets to Target Blast. Each improvement on the single player made it even better, and I still believe that the current iteration of Classic Mode is my favorite solo play mode in all the games. Along with the new solo games, the Master Hand fight actually changed a ton too. In the first game, you can see from this footage, Master Hand just would move around the stage constantly. He wouldn't stay in the top right or top left of the stage, but would sometimes jump to the center or fly away as you walk up to him. This added a bit of difficulty in the Master Hand fight to make sure he wouldn't just be a punching bag. In Melee, they changed him to stand still. While he had new abilities and could still technically move around the stage through them, he would always return to the same location. Melee also introduced Crazy Hand, who did similar moves to Master Hand, but more erratic and sometimes with a slightly different effect. He would only show up on very specific circumstances, just like Giga Bowser from Adventure Mode. Brawl changed the Master Hand fight, although I feel for a worse. While he looks really great in this game, he also has become much easier, and became exactly what his programming in 64 was made to prevent. He became a punching bag. While he still had some difficulty, he was a pretty mediocre boss fight. Crazy Hand was still involved, showing up on specific conditions again as a fun extra amount of difficulty, but they were still an easy boss fight. This was pretty understandable though, with the game having so many other bosses that it really wasn't as big a deal as it would have been in something like Melee. Smash 4 brought in my favorite iteration of the Master Hand fight. I went very into depth about this fight in my previous video, so I won't talk too much about it, but I will say that it did exactly what I was hoping a final boss fight in Smash Bros. Would be someday, which is that it increases complexity, with the boss having more and more phases when you increase difficulty. Next, I'm going to talk about the multiplayer throughout the different games in general. In the first game, similar to single player, there's not a whole lot of different customizable options. In fact, characters were missing their side special ability altogether. Stages were limited and quite boring as compared to how they are nowadays, as mentioned earlier. The only mode of play was versus mode. There was no special smash or tournament. While it was limited, you were able to have CPUs active and choose their difficulties, or you could play with friends. You could team up against a CPU or set up a handicap match with a bunch of CPUs against you, or any number of different ways to change this. You could also customize stock or timed battles, as well as the ability to set certain items or handicaps or friendly fire or a few other things. When Melee came around, new ways of play were added in. Interestingly enough, there were less additions to versus mode than solo play. All that they added in were tournaments and special smashes. It also added more customization in the menus for actual in-game gameplay. Brawl and Smash 4 didn't change a whole lot about versus mode, aside from the inclusion of 8-player Smash and online mode in Smash 4, which I guess is pretty significant, but in reality it wasn't too game-changing, just very welcome. While versus mode didn't change a whole lot throughout the game, it actually says a lot for the game that they didn't need it to be changed too much. They got it correct right off the bat, and were able to just make minor adjustments to keep it fresh. Last thing I want to mention is the physics in the game. Surprisingly enough, each game changed the physics of the game. A big part of this is improvements to the characters, like Link being able to rise a lot more with his recovery after Smash 64, but these things were pretty obvious to see just through playing the game. What I'm going to talk about is the change in general physics between all the games. In Smash 64, characters tended to be kinda heavy, but not too heavy. Coincidentally, I actually feel like Smash 64 has the second best physics in all of the series. Melee really turned the gravity up pretty high, and characters would fall like a rock, especially characters like Bowser and Crenando, which I guess makes sense, it just makes them very unideal. Brawl took a complete 360 and then a 180, because why not do a pirouette, on the physics and made the characters much more floaty. While this doesn't mean the characters would fall like they were on the moon, it did make them feel like they were pretty high up in the atmosphere. It could have been much worse, but characters did feel extremely floaty compared to Melee. As you may have guessed by now, Smash 4 has my favorite physics. Characters don't feel too floaty, but they also don't feel too heavy. It's a great medium. And this brings us to the end of Super Smash Bros. In retrospect. We've talked a lot about each game in depth, but there's actually a whole lot more that could be covered if I wanted to make each video half an hour long. Super Smash Bros. Is an amazing series, and I don't know if I've ever seen a series that has gone on for as long and been as successful. If you have the time, play through these games. Each one of them is a masterpiece with endless entertainment. Well, those are my thoughts on the Super Smash Bros. Series. I'd like to know what you guys think about any of the games. Leave a comment about it. Click the annotations on the screen currently to take you to the other parts of the Smash Bros. In Retrospect series of videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.